Hello again, this is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with Rudy's Common Sense. Today's episode, we are going to discuss creeping socialism. Maybe galloping socialism. Maybe galloping communism. Unless you've been living in a basement for the last 2 years, like somebody I know, you can't have missed the fact that we have made enormous strides toward becoming a socialist or communist government. If you are a student at all of history, you will see that the milestones we have hit along the way are basically the guidelines and the guideposts that you can derive from the writings of Marx and Engels and Trotsky, and other lesser communist and socialist writers as the things that have to be done to change the power structure, to bring down a country, to change its system of government to a socialist or communist system. It's largely implicit in the works of Saul Alinsky, who was an American communist who had a great influence on people like Obama and Hillary Clinton. It can't be missed. I mean, you really have to close your eyes and just become totally anti-intellectual and just be dishonest to say that the things that are being done, particularly very aggressively now in the last 2 years, and certainly since Biden has come into office, seem to be following a script, and they are moving very, very quickly. So it is time that we analyze it and see what we think about it and see what we have to do about it. During the presidential campaign of 2020, Biden presented himself as kind of the answer to the Bernie Sanders rather direct advocacy of socialism as a better form of government than the form of government given to us by our founding fathers. Now, he had opened that whole argument in 2016. Up until then, it was almost unthinkable that a candidate of the Republican or Democrat Party would run on a platform of socialism. Because to go back 10 or 15 years, there was enough of a collective memory of the tremendous failure of socialist and communist governments. And not only the tremendous failure, but the tendency of such governments to become violent, dictatorial, to the point of ultimately being homicidal to the extreme. But certainly, even in the lesser situations of socialism, 26, 27 governments have tried it, and they've all failed. And the few that exist certainly are not models for anyone to follow. China, 40, 50% of the country is living in third world poverty, abysmal poverty. Venezuela, economy, society destroyed by communism. Cuba, destroyed by communism. Even the countries of Europe that have tried modified forms of socialism have all moved away from it in one way or another. Yet, Bernie Sanders comes along in 2016, openly avows socialism, and he almost wins the nomination of the Democrat Party. Some people think he did win. And by the time we get to 2020, it's now an acceptable area of debate within the Democrat Party, maybe even the dominant thinking, aided greatly by AOC and the Squad. Now, this is a very unusual American political development. These very young, inexperienced, fairly, how do I put this nicely, poorly educated people with really no experience other than, it looks like, political agitation, started making pronouncements that 10 years earlier would probably have gotten thrown out of Congress, and one would have wondered what they're doing here in the United States. We're talking about AOC, of course, and Tlaib and Omar and Presley, and now a couple of new ones have joined them. And at first, it looked like they would just be gadflies, just saying all kinds of stupid things. but not just stupid. I mean, anti-Semitic, anti-white, anti-American, dangerous comments about Israel and about the security of the United States, vicious attacks on our law enforcement agencies, the generalized charge of systemic corruption, basically charging the country with being inherently evil. These are all things that it's really just hard to believe when they first started that Nancy Pelosi, who's been in Congress forever, didn't just shut him down. But not only didn't she shut him down, she gave him the floor. I mean, a lot of people tease and say they're really the speaker. But it wasn't just Nancy Pelosi. It was as if no Democrat would ever go up against him. No matter how irresponsible, no matter how reckless, no matter how anti-Semitic, no matter how anti-American, no matter how anti-white, no matter how anti-police, military, no matter what, they were not condemned. They were not, their views were not rejected. Now, you've seen Republicans have to do that. They just recently did it with a new member of Congress, fairly or unfairly. Even more shocking was the fear of almost any Democrat to criticize any of the irresponsible, reckless, anti-Semitic, anti-white comments of these rookies. It was almost as if there was a fear that had overtaken the Democrat Party, because it's hard to believe that many of these Democrats actually believe this stuff. All of a sudden, it was acceptable to accuse America of being systemically racist. You know, they say it so often, I wonder if they really understand what it means. I mean, Biden has now repeated it 4 or 5 times. The president of the United States has basically said that his country is essentially an evil country. I mean, what it means to be systemically racist is, systemically, one of the dictionary meanings of it is that it affects the entire organization. It's not just an isolated situation. It affects the entire organization. It permeates the organization, is another description of it. So America is entirely affected by and permeated by racism. Or put another way, many more Americans are racist than are not. Well, a country that has overwhelming numbers of racists is an evil country. Is America an evil country? And how do they get away with saying this? And they're all, really, really happy and satisfied. I mean, they're getting a lot more out of Biden than they thought they would get. He is basically reaching and hitting all the guideposts that you got to hit to set up the country to make a massive change in its fundamental structure and a major change in its fundamental values. So basically, what he's going about is to change our form of government and our way of life. And right now, both are in serious jeopardy. He's following the script that's laid out by Marxists and Maoists for undermining a government and society and then taking control of it, because people become so disturbed with it, so angry at it, so concerned about it. So let's look at the guideposts. What are they? Any overthrow of one form of government for another, or one economic system for another, requires at the core public rejection of the current system of government. I mean, the first thing necessary to move toward socialism or communism, if you are a republic, a democracy, or even a monarchy, whatever you are, is to get a critical mass of the population to hate their country. Probably that's the simplest way to put it. To hate their country, to hate its history, to hate its heroes, to hate its form of government, to hate its basic values, its way of life. I mean, and you can see the progress that's been made there. I mean, for several decades, maybe even more, socialists and their willing and obedient servants have strived to rewrite our history. And somehow they've taken this exceptional country quite rightly described as the last great hope of humanity. And they've turned it into a thoroughly evil nation, founded for the sole purpose of slavery and dominated to this day with the vestiges of slavery, racism, white supremacy, white privilege, and other equally vile and evil and horrible things that are done here by particularly the white, and particularly the white male population. In any event, this process requires getting us, or many of us, particularly in the ivory tower elites who have very little practical experience and are dreamers and thinkers and philosophers but don't really have much experience with life, to get them to reject just about everything about us. I mean, look at the campaigns that have been carried on. Large portions of America are being led, and particularly our young people, through the total desecration of our history. They're being taught to hate the founder, the discoverer of our country, or at least a discoverer of record of our country, Christopher Columbus. He's an evil man who participated in genocide. How do they know that? I mean, it goes back hundreds of years into a cloudy past. Instead of concentrating on the rather novel thing that he did, which is to not necessarily discover the new world, but to literally and figuratively put it on the map. We gotta hate the father of our country. We know who the father of our country is, those of us who were taught history, George Washington. No. George was a slave owner, evil, horrible slave owner. Oh, Jefferson, my goodness. The author of our liberty and our freedom. The poetry and the power of his words have liberated not just Americans, but millions and millions all over the world. He's at the core of so many revolutions against oppression. Oh, no. He's a slave owner and was involved in immoral activity. And got to take his statue down. Got to get rid of that bad guy. And I don't know, without making too much of it, needless to say, if we're also going to reject and take down the statue of the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, we're kind of just finished, right? Abraham Lincoln is evil because although he did in fact emancipate the slaves, end slavery, fought a war and won that emancipation with the blood of hundreds of thousands of white men, as well as black men, but mostly white men who fought for the freedom of black men. Even with that, because earlier in his life he had reservations if slavery should be ended immediately or it should be phased in so that people could adapt to society. And because of those reservations, he's an evil man. We got to take his statue down. Time to take a short break. Your credit card company found suspicious charges on your card. That's simple identity theft. It's annoying, but they cover it. The type of fraud you really need to worry about is home title theft, a devastating crime that takes you off your home's title. And you're not covered by insurance or most identity theft programs. That's why you need Home Title Lock. Here's how easy it is for cyber criminals to get you. The title documents to our homes are kept online. The thief forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you just sold your home, and he's the new owner. Then he borrows money using your home's equity and leaves you in debt. You won't know until late payment or eviction notices arrive. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with your home's title, they help shut it down. Let's get you protected. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. And enter Rudy for 30 free days of protection. That's promo code Rudy at HometitleLock.com. Thank you for returning. I was just at Gettysburg and I took a picture of a soldier who represented the Brooklyn Regiment that fought in the Civil War. And they had won actually, along with several other regiments, quite an interesting skirmish in the war. And there's a great statue of this Brooklyn soldier. And I thought, just so nice to see a guy from Brooklyn there. And I took the picture, and all of a sudden I tweeted it out, and I get all these replies. Giuliani is now embracing Confederates. Giuliani is now embracing slave-owning Confederates. These uneducated morons had no idea that Brooklyn is in the North. It's sad, right? I mean, this was Hamilton's fear and Madison's fear. We become so uneducated, we could be easily maneuvered through propaganda. And then, you know, when a democracy is ignorant, it quickly turns into a dictatorship. But I mean, the attack on our heroes is not enough. They burn our flag. They disrespectfully kneel during the singing of the national anthem. They attack our public monuments. They spew hatred for our men and women in uniform, particularly our law enforcement men and women in uniform. How about pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon? I mean, that's the main chant of Black Lives Matter. Okay, we can make that a little simpler. Kill cops. And they come from a lineage, Black Panthers, that killed cops. Those people trained them. The core of Marxism, socialism, communism. The line, very, 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 very indistinct between them. It's class warfare. The bourgeoisie, the rich, against the proletariat, the worker. And the bourgeoisie taking advantage of the worker. Well, from the beginning of communism, and then its attempt here, it didn't work in our country. The core principle in America that people, by hard work, can accomplish whatever they want to accomplish was so strong that there was no room, really, for communism to flourish because, in fact, that was not only a principle, people saw that principle work itself out. I mean, you could say that America, and even if we call it American capitalism, has probably taken more people out of poverty than any other economic system in the history of the world. Certainly much better than socialism and communism, which basically consigns country to economic ruin and eventually destruction. So they couldn't crack through with this class struggle, rich against poor. And they kind of realized that the Protestant work ethic, which they considered to be completely invalid, was standing in their way. Because equality in America means equality of opportunity, not result. And they weren't going to crack that. But dating back to the 1960s particularly, communists were making every effort they could to infiltrate the civil rights movement. They had relatively no success in infiltrating the main civil rights movement, the movement led by Martin Luther King Jr., based on nonviolence. But they had a great deal of success in infiltrating the more extreme groups that did invoke violence, did practice violence, did kill police officers. And they became a very big influence and organizing force in those groups, the groups that have now kind of been the lineage of Black Lives Matter, where there's a very strong communist presence. So in doing that, they made a change in the theory. So communism, critical theory, rich against poor, proletariat against the bourgeoisie. For this revolution, it's race. Race is the conflict, the everlasting, the eternal conflict that will go on no matter what we do. I think this would be a good time to pause. I accomplished a lot in 2020 exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Now let's go back to our analysis. Let's look at the guideposts now. So you got to teach a country to hate itself. Well, they've done a pretty good job with all of these flag burnings and kneelings and statue destructions and rewrite of history. But it's through the transformation of education that they've really made their biggest strides. And they've made a lot of strides there. The debate now is over programs that have already been installed in our schools and have been taught now for lengthy periods of time. The 1619 New York Times version of our history, as it's all explained by racism, by slavery, is taught in many schools, and even when it isn't taught formally, it invades the thinking. The critical race theory, which is the modification of the Marxist critical theory about class conflict, is taught in schools from K to 12, from college, undergraduate to graduate. It's taught in businesses, sports, social and religious organizations throughout the United States. And without probably our noticing for quite some time, the children, the students, and the recipients of this teaching, many of them are getting brainwashed. Brainwashed into the thought that slavery and racism is like the original sin of America that has not been removed from the white soul. So I'm a racist. I don't know it, but I'm a racist. And if I try to say that I'm not, I'm told, well, I just don't know it. Makes it hard then to discuss rationally, doesn't it? And the more that view prevails, that America is inherently racist. The necessity for destroying our form of government, our way of life, becomes much greater because we have to destroy an evil government to replace it with a good government. And the strides made in education are very, very concerning. They've made big steps towards socialism and communism. So if we want to check off one of the guideposts to socialism and communism, which is capturing your educational system and turning it into the enemy of your form of government, well, they're not completely there, but they've made very, very big strides, haven't they? Critical to any Marxist revolution, as critical as education, is the elimination of the opiate of the people, the opium of the people, the drug for the people. And that's religion. That's belief in God. In fact, religion and belief in God are probably the greatest barrier to realizing a Marxist government. For socialism to work, or communism to work, and to either lead people or force people to give up their property and to give up what they earn, requires making socialism the greatest goal in life. Anything for socialism. Anything that has to be done, anything that must be done. I mean, I'm not just, these come from the books of Marx and Lenin and Trotsky and the speeches of Stalin, the words of Mao, the present speeches of Xi Jinping. So, socialism has to be the highest authority. And of course, it has to be encased in a government so that it can act and make decisions and force decisions. And that must be the be-all and end-all of life. There can't be any God above that, where you have some higher obligation to anything else other than socialism. Because that higher obligation is going to create conflict with the irrational and troubling things socialism wants you to do, which are completely contrary to human nature. So the core principle of socialism, so that you can understand it really simply, is the following. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. This was stated probably most prominently, but not necessarily for the first time, by Karl Marx in his 1875 critique of the Gotha program. People work, they work hard, and then in order for socialism to work, someone has to be the enforcer. Someone has to come along and say, John, you worked very hard. You worked much harder than everybody else in this community. But John, we're going to take all your money and we're going to decide how much you can keep based on how much need there is in this community. And you say, no, well, let me first determine how much I want to keep for me and my family. And then I'll figure out how much I want to donate to the rest of the community. And they say, absolutely not. This is the socialist dogma, the communist dogma. And for socialism to work, for that distribution to take place, you need force. You need the force of law, the force of government. You need force similar to the kind of force exercised by organized crime groups, because you're really stealing from someone. And basically that then becomes an all-powerful government with centralized authority beyond anything we could ever imagine in the United States. Now, what does that have to do with God? A belief in God, a higher authority, is a frightening prospect for a true socialist or communist, because a belief in God will mean there's something higher than socialism. And a belief in God will lead you necessarily to other beliefs, because this is so contrary to human nature. So this is all totally contrary to the American system of government that was given to us by our founding fathers. We created a government about which we were very suspicious. America had been enslaved by a king and treated without any regard for people's rights. So when we created our government, we were very, very frightened of a government that would become too powerful. And when we did the Bill of Rights, we made it clear that those rights aren't given to us by government. Government's not important enough to give us rights. Those rights are given to us by God. Well, even for those who don't believe in God, they were given to us, they're natural rights. They're rights that every human being in the world has. Every human being has the right of free speech. Every human being has the right to defend himself. Every human being has the right to exercise religion or not, in the way that he wants to. Every human being should have the right to be subjected to a fair process to determine if their property is going to be taken away or if they're going to be imprisoned. These are basic human rights. They're not controlled by government. If they are controlled by government, government necessarily becomes a dictatorial government. So over the last year or year and a half, everything I've just said has to be something you've thought of and something you've seen happen, because over the last year and a half since the outbreak of the pandemic from CCP virus, there has been the greatest assault on our Bill of Rights ever in the history of this government. More rights have been taken away, more rights have been compromised, more rights have been narrowed than ever before in our history. It's as if it's a checklist of the Bill of Rights. It begins with what we talked about, which is, let's see if we can reduce the power of religion. So the first thing was that people couldn't go to church. This all happened during the pretty much when Holy Week was coming up for Christians and the Passover was coming up for Jews, and they weren't allowed to really celebrate it as their religions allowed them to do in the case of the Jews for, millennia, in the case of the Christians for 2,000 years. And no accommodation was made for it. They were led like sheep to the slaughter, and they much too easily complied, I believe, not realizing that at the core of the philosophy of the people making these decisions is this desire to remove God from the public discussion, to remove religion from the public square, because it stands in the way of what they want to accomplish. Going to church was very dangerous, but thousands and thousands of Black Lives Matter and Antifa people standing arm in arm, shouting, spitting at each other and yelling out the police should be killed, somehow didn't spread CCP virus. Indeed, when they opened the churches, they said only 20% in a church, but 50% in a business, including a strip parlor. I mean, this went too far. A court found that Governor Cuomo had violated the free exercise of religion when he did that. But the thing that troubles me the most is that focus on religion. They wanted to do everything they could to use the pandemic, the CCP virus, as an excuse to reduce, if not eliminate, the power of religion, because it stands in the way of their goals. Another very, very dangerous characteristic that got displayed was the authoritarian nature of some of these progressive Democrat leaders. It has been my view for years that socialism fails, among other reasons, because it always becomes authoritarian. Because what it wants to do is so contrary to human nature, human beings resist, and they have to be forced to do it. You're just going to resist the government coming in and saying, I'm going to take 75% of what you earn because other people have greater needs. You're going to say, well, wait, let me figure out my needs and my children's needs. Then we can start working on that. So to accomplish what socialism and communism wants to accomplish, it requires force. It requires authoritarianism. And in the mind and the soul and the thinking of these irresponsible, silly, semi-socialists who live in some theoretical world, it's okay to do that. I mean, how can you explain Governor Newsom, Governor Cuomo, Governor Whitmer, with their pronouncing these ridiculous dictates about masks and travel, and they violated it themselves? Well, we can go on vacation, but you can't. We can go to restaurants and not wear a mask, but you can't. Or in the case of the mayor of Chicago, we can get our hair done, but nobody else in Chicago can. Or Black Lives Matter and Antifa, gee, my goodness, they can They can protest all they want, yelling and screaming and doing whatever they want in large numbers, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, but you can't get 20% in the church. Well, if that's not enough, then came the great censorships, the Biden hard drive censorship. American people couldn't find out. Let me put it to you directly. What a big crook Joe Biden is. For 30 years, Joe Biden and his family have been selling his office. They've now accumulated millions of dollars, selling out the United States of America, most egregious of which are in countries like Ukraine, China, Russia. Now with Biden in office, we see an accelerated march towards socialism that is astounding. I don't know, I may have these numbers off, but probably low. He's recommended, or he's pushed for, or he's gotten, or in part recommended and gotten about $6 to $7 million in extra spending. Most of it is non-essential. Most of it is to pay off political debts. I mean, if this doesn't create massive back-breaking inflation, nothing will. It'll crash our dollar. It will, of course, mean that the government has to raise taxes to what you would say were confiscatory levels. And for those in Democratic states, particularly, like mine, New York, California, Illinois, you're going to be paying 55 to 60% of what you earn to the government. So you become the junior partner in your earnings, and the government becomes the senior partner. In other words, the government takes more of your earnings than you are allowed to keep. Now, tell me that isn't a big, big step toward redistribution of wealth. Take it from those based on their ability and give it to those based on their needs. Or in the case of the United States, since only about 50% of our population pays taxes and the other 50% doesn't, basically it's let's take from the 50% who pay taxes and give it to the 50% who don't pay taxes. Or let's take it from the people who work and give it to the people who don't work and who are making more money on welfare than the jobs that are being made available to them. And that's being deliberately done by Democrat policy to create a larger base of a dependent community. So this also gets you to an overlapping other guidepost of communism, so one-party system. I mean, what do you think all of this encouragement for illegal immigrants to come into this country is all about? I mean, you got to be crazy with the level of crime in this country, with the amount of terrorism that goes on, with the fear of communicable diseases, to invite large numbers of people to come into this country illegally. But that's exactly what the Democrat platform and Biden did. I mean, you come into this country, you're going to get health care. You're not going to be expelled. You're going to be given a road to citizenship. And you're going to qualify for all kinds of payments. I mean, New York just gave a retroactive payment to all the illegals of $15,000. Now, why would they do that? The base of American immigration that made America great, where people came here legally for the desire to work. People didn't come here mainly for the government dependency payments. And the people they're encouraging now to come here are the people for the dependency payments. That's why they advertise state very broadly. You'll get health care, you'll get welfare, you won't be expelled, you got a road to citizenship. Just come on in. Oh, and by the way, vote Democrat. Maybe worst of all is the politicizing of the system of justice. I mean, we saw that in the Obama administration with him and Holder, and the concentration on investigations against conservative groups. And then it reached its pinnacle in the fixed investigation of Hillary Clinton. I mean, all I need to say is she destroyed 33,000 emails that were relevant material and she didn't get prosecuted. That wouldn't happen to anybody else. Certainly wouldn't happen to a Republican. Imagine if a Republican did that. And then they pursued the president on one phony charge after another. Russian collusion, false charge, never apologized. Conversation with the Ukrainian president turned out to be entirely proper, particularly if the FBI hadn't covered up the hard drive, which contains a complete explanation of why the president had that conversation. In order to investigate high-level crime at the highest levels of two governments, he had a constitutional obligation to raise that question. The FBI deprived him of exculpatory evidence on purpose by hiding the hard drive. We can't be a fair country if people are treated differently based on their political affiliation. All I need to do, maybe to illustrate this, is just ask you to think about this honestly. If Donald Trump Jr. were accused of getting $3.5 million from the crooked wife of the crooked mayor of Moscow, who is close to Vladimir Putin, for no explained reason, do you think that would be ignored? Or do you think they would invade Donald Trump's house, search him like he was a terrorist, and rip apart his house and apartment, like they did to me over a completely false charge? You know what would happen. Or what would happen if the crookedest man in Ukraine hired Eric Trump and paid him $7-8 million for a no-show job, and then got favors from President Trump, including President Trump saving the guy's business? I don't know, you think that'd be investigated by the Justice Department? Well, or maybe easier even, suppose Eric Trump lied on a gun application and said, I'm not a drug addict, when in fact there was a picture of him 5 days earlier smoking a crack pipe. Do I have to tell you what would happen? And do you see how pernicious, how dangerous, how destructive this double standard is? As long as it exists, our country will be permanently divided, and it'll just get worse. It'll just get worse. Well, I mean, we're on our way to socialism. Here are the guidelines they've met. God, religion, they sure diminish it. Free speech, I don't know. For certain purposes, we might as well be in the old Soviet Union, East Berlin, or present China. Free exercise of religion. Couldn't go to church on Easter last year. And unless you're one of 20, you couldn't go to church this year. Right to assemble? No. Only if you're Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Otherwise, I don't know, you may be engaged in sedition. Right to defend yourself. Your right to bear arms to defend yourself under attack. Due process, the double standard. The idea that we're all treated equally. Totally destroyed. And the military. Well, all you have to do is read the best-selling book by Matthew Lohmeyer, Irresistible Revolution. It's #1 on the Amazon list. It led to his being relieved of his command. He just happens to be a Space Force lieutenant colonel. His book, Irresistible Revolution, expresses his belief that Marxism is taking over the military. They are. Like they're taking over America. But this man wasn't allowed to express his opinion in a country of free speech. How can that be? How have we gone that far? So what can we do to fight back? And when I say fight back, please let me qualify that by saying legally, lawfully, peacefully, but very, very decisively. First of all, we got to be aware of it. We can't let these things just go by without noting them, which is what I am trying to do for you. Every Friday now, I have an alert, and I pick out the worst, what I believe is the worst intrusion on our rights that week, so we can record it and follow it. I mean, this is what people who study the Holocaust would tell you. By ignoring it early on and not calling it out, they let it build and build and build, and then it was just beyond them. So we're not going to let that happen. We're going to call it out. You have to become active with a group or groups that want to save our Constitution and our way of life and who want to act on these intrusions to help other people. We've got to stick together. We're being attacked as a group. Third, you got to become politically active now. You got to get ready for the 2022 elections. We can stop their advances in taking away our way of life and our form of government if we can elect a Republican House and Senate that can put some of the brakes on the march towards socialism. You can boycott the companies that you believe have sold out America. You know, the ones that really prefer China to the US, like the NBA, or Major League Baseball and the NFL, who support Black Lives Matter, which advocates the killing of police officers. You can refuse to do business with them. I mean, I love sports. It was a major part of my life. I don't watch them anymore. I'm sorry, I love my country more than I love even baseball and football, basketball. And you can boycott all those who endorse the critical race theory that basically say you're a racist, but you don't know it. What the heck would you want to buy anything from them for? And then try to find the businesses that are fighting for the things that you believe in and support them. Let's stick together to save our country. And let's have the back of those who are attacked viciously and unfairly and canceled and destroyed and everything else they want to do. Let's have their back. Let's help them. Let's support them. And all of that will create a movement that will ensure that the good sense of the American people will be engaged and they will get to see what's happening to them, because this has happened surreptitiously. It's hidden by the mainstream press. It's only us, people like me and Dan Bongino and the other people, Ben Stein, and the other people who engage in these podcasts and radio discussions that bring these things to you, and several of the networks, OAN and Newsmax, and to some extent Fox. But that's it. Otherwise, we're shut out. So when we get to you, you've got to act. So respond. My website is rudyscommonsense.com. Send me your thoughts, your ideas. I've got a very, very bold idea I'm working on that we will hopefully unveil in the next week or two. But several of your ideas on what we can do about this might be helpful in my shaping that. And we just have to stick together. And you can find out what's going on, as much as I can figure out what's going on, by staying close to rudyscommonsense.com. Both the podcasts, the weekly alerts, and the radio shows that I do every day. And not just me, but all of these people who are allies of ours, who are trying to get you the information that is being censored and that you're deprived of. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this because our ancestors were the bravest, most courageous, most freedom-loving people in the history of the world. And they created a great nation for us. And with that comes a great burden to protect it. And, you know, it's not always under attack, but it is right now. And if you're a patriot, this is the time to stand up. This is the time to stand up. And we can't do everything, but to do your part. I've outlined some of the things you can do. Why don't you communicate with me and tell me some of the other things you would like to do? rudyscommonsense.com. But don't give up hope. we're on the right side here. And in America, the right side always prevails. We still haven't lost that. We're still God's favored country. We're still the country on earth that more people want to come to than any in the world. And we still have the most freedom and the most rights of any ever granted to human beings. For that, we pray every day, a prayer of thanksgiving to God for allowing us to be here in America. So you make sure every morning you get up and you do that. And that'll give you the inspiration to not get down about this, but to have the spirit of we will prevail. Thank you. Be well. God bless America, and we'll be back very shortly. Thank you.